2 Filipino-American activists were murdered in their union hall in Alaska. Actually, it was in Seattle. I didn't catch that typo.
For the second edition.
Let me know, I'll highlight it and I'll change it.
So yeah, we're actually gonna be near there when we do the action this afternoon. The Union Hall is at the intersection of what has become known as Pioneer Square and the International District, but that part of town was the International District at one point. And I'm excited for everyone to go to the International District together today because it's such an important part of our history. So anyway, they were murdered in their union hall here in Seattle. One of these activists was my father, Ligaya Domingo. The other was Jean Viernes. They were both members of Alaska Cannery Workers Union, ILWU, Local 37. The media interpreted this as a union squabble. There was, however, a much deeper explanation connected to efforts in which these men had been engaged for over a decade, efforts to reform their union and to build a movement for civil and human rights in Seattle and in the Philippines. Ultimately, they were murdered by then Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos in a conspiracy carried out by many others to silence Silmy and Jean. I'll also point out that on our convention booklet, their pictures are here up in the corner. We wanted to have an acknowledgement of them as part of this convention, since it's really historical to have this convention here for the first time. And, they're 2 very important labor leaders that many don't know about in our history. My father, Silmy, is known for his work with the Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, KDP, or Union of Democratic Filipinos, the anti-martial law movement, and for his leadership and reform efforts with the Alaska Cannery Workers Union. My mother, Terry Mast, was also a leader in the Cannery Workers Union and the larger labor movement in Seattle and internationally. Their efforts were not isolated, but were part of what has become known as the Asian American movement. So then I go on to talk a little bit about the Asian American movement. And there's this picture of me as a little kid actually, I think this action was at Hing Hay Park, which is where we're going to be going today. And this was Philippine National Day in 1982. So growing up as a child of movement leaders, I had a unique experience. I spent weekends with my mother and other family members, both blood-related and chosen family, through activism, at organizing meetings or demonstrations. We spent many weekends outside of the South African consulate demonstrating against apartheid in South Africa. On weekends after school, I often spent time with my mother in her union hall as she met with Alascaros, the elders who helped to build the union, the first generation of Filipinos who worked in the Alaska salmon canneries. We stood with them and for those often unseen in our broader society. Like many young Filipinas, I was ingrained with the idea that becoming a professional like a doctor would be the road to success. I imagined many plans for myself of how I would make it. At first, I wanted to be a marine biologist. My dream was to be a marine biologist on the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior. I wanted to help save our environment. I didn't realize how drawn to activism I was, despite my attempts to have a more professional career. As I moved closer to environmental organizing, I realized that what we were fighting for as environmentalists was the same as what the community and workers were fighting for. We had a shared struggle. I became drawn to union organizing, and the more involved I became, the more my life snapped into focus. I called my mother from one of my first trainings and told her that everything finally made sense. I finally understood for myself what she and my father had been fighting for on behalf of working people. I became a union organizer at 18 years old. Organizing at such a young age was somewhat daunting and an intimidating task. My mother didn't want me to become an organizer, but I felt drawn to it. After all, I had learned from my parents at a young age how to see and build connections with those who often go unseen. At first, I dreamt of working with workers classically thought of as needing unions because I was inspired by the movie Norma Rae. I held romanticized notions of what organizing might be like, and my first organizing assignment was to organize healthcare workers, who are often not thought of as needing unions. On the first campaign I worked on, I met with nurses who told me stories of how hard it was for them to provide the kind of care they wanted for their patients because of hospital conditions, specifically the lack of prioritization for safe staffing and wages and benefits that would recruit and retain quality staff. The nurses' pain, compassion, and love for their patients compelled me to help build strong unions that could collectively fight for what they needed. I came to the realization that all workers need unions, and the first successful organizing campaign I worked on was with healthcare workers in Yakima, Washington, which is in eastern Washington. They successfully organized a union in Yakima where the wage increases and other protections won against a corporate healthcare hospital made a huge difference for the workers, their families, and the community as a whole. Standing with workers has helped me realize that I have to walk the walk. I not only want to help them be seen, but I also have to stand up every day and fight to be seen myself. So I'm gonna fast forward.